Well, I mean, that's just the names. I mean, I could see where, like, they're just doing a race and it's like, oh, and Killa's X passes Bluntmaster on the inside. And by the way, let me tell you my thoughts on the Trump presidency.
Welcome back to Cartridge Based Radio. I'm Donald, once again joined by Brad.
Hello!
Brad, are you ready to lane split and rash some roads?
Sure? Are those things?
That's the totality of motorbike lingo I know.
All right.
I know lane splitting is when you drive either down the yellow line or in between cars.
Okay.
And some people think it's cheating. And Road Rash is when you slide if you go by Road Rash by EA, about 12 miles down the road on your ass.
Into a tree.
Yeah, and just get up. We are continuing a month of EA classics with Road Rash 1, 2, and lightly 3.
There is no Road Rash 3. It's a myth. You must be thinking of Road Rash 3D, which came out much later on the PlayStation. Because I'm pretty sure that there wasn't anything called Road Rash 3 on the Genesis. That didn't happen.
No, Brad. We are going to have to talk a little bit about Road Rash 3 because all great series have to come to a crashing end, apparently, on the Genesis. We saw it with Streets of Rage, and history repeats itself here. No, we were talking Motorbike Combat Classic Road Rash.
Yes, Road Rash, the first one came out in 1992. Sequel came out a year later. The number 3 is just cursed in Genesis games, isn't it?
It is.
Nevertheless, the third one came out in 1995, which was just a bad time for Genesis games. The system was basically crumbling right before your eyes, and there weren't a lot of great games that came out on the system by then, and Road Rash 3 did not break that tradition at all. But let's talk about happier times. Let's talk about Road Rash 1 and 2.
So, a Road Rash, I played it some back when it first came out.
Yeah.
And as time does, it progressed, and I really forgot about Road Rash. We need to talk about the technology of Road Rash, because everyone hails Mario Kart as this wonderful-looking game on the SNES. Road Rash is stunning in the way it presents the road coming at you.
Yeah.
In a much more crisp and clean way than Mario Kart ever can be. I was like, am I looking at polygons here? Because this road is scrolling way too smoothly, and there's corners and there's hills, and you can catch up to stuff, and it scales nicely. Road Rash is an impressive game today.
Yeah, especially compared to other 16-bit racing games on the Super Nintendo or on the Genesis. It does a great job of showing the layout of the road coming up, ahead of you. It does a really good job of making it feel like it's in a 3D space. You're conveying the distance that you're traveling, the turns in the road, and changes in height, some of which makes the game a lot more challenging because when you're going up a hill, you can't see what the road's going to do on the other side of the hill or if there's cars coming, which is kind of realistic but also kind of challenging at times. It does get a little frustrating.
It asks you to use the brake button, which that's just crazy. You're on a motorbike, it's all out or nothing.
I'd forgotten about this, and I thought the Gran Turismo had invented using the brake in a racing game 5 years later.
No time for breaks with Brad. So you're I don't know if you're in a motorcycle gang or you're just a guy with the only red jumpsuit in the world.
I have a theory about Road Rash.
I'd like to hear your theory on Road Rash.
So Road Rash is a game where you drive a motorcycle and you're racing against a bunch of other competitors. You can punch them and brawl with them as you race. You also get chased by the cops sometimes. And the way it was presented to me is that, this is a all out, everybody's brawling to win the race kind of nasty competition. But when I was playing it, I noticed I was always the one initiating the fights, and the cops were only coming after me. And I started to think that this is actually just the story of a guy terrorizing like a motorcycle touring club that isn't trying to race, that isn't trying to fight. They're just like out on a nice leisurely motorcycle ride, and you're just tearing through them, punching them, and hitting them with clubs. And, they call the police to save them, and then you like murder the police.
Oh, wow. You have just cast this game in an entire new light for me. That is 100% correct. Road Rash is all about, the bike fighting, as you said. Like the title screen, now they think about it, the guy on the red bike has his hand out shoving the guy on the blue bike.
Yeah.
The guy on the blue bike's not doing anything back. He's looking shocked. He's like, what are you doing, dude? And you can race without punching and hitting. You can just go and they won't do anything back to you.
I think probably this is just the story of like you as some like psychopath just raining terror down on these people.
My thought of what this game really was, it's a retelling of a guy, and he's talking about how he just took out all these bikers in this high stakes game. And everyone listening to this story is like, sure, Jeff, we believe you. Because Jeff has a habit of telling tall tales. So he's like, yeah, I was going 300 miles an hour and I punched someone. They're like, that would rip your arm off, Jeff. Just clean off. No, I'm super buff.
The one thing that kind of tipped it off for me was that in the first one, after you finish a race, it shows just like a little picture of like all the bikers like at whatever was at the finish line, like hanging out, having a nice time. Like one, they're like tubing in a river, another, they're all at a saloon together. And it's like, if you were racing against people and like punching them and shoving them in front of oncoming cars, like you probably wouldn't just like hang out at a bar afterwards and be like, oh, that was fun.
Jeff goes flying by and he's like, losers.
So, I get the feeling that, like, Rude Boy and Lawson and Natalia and the rest of them are all friends that are just in a club. And you are not.
Yeah, at the beginning of each race, you have the race introduced by various people who say stupid things.
Yeah, they're mostly friendly to you, though.
Yeah.
They're not aware of the hell that you're about to unleash on them. They're just like, oh, hey, look, a new guy.
Why don't you cruise with us? And then he just starts punching. And I have a problem with the punching. Have you ever punched a motorcycle helmet?
Why would I have punched him up? Like, what life do you think I lead?
You had several years of your life before I met you, and I'm just asking if you've ever punched a motorcycle helmet. Because those are designed for when you crash to protect your head from becoming an inverse watermelon.
Yeah.
So I imagine they're made of tough stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're on a bike and you take a swing and punch a helmet, that's not going to do much to the head of the person inside the helmet, but it's going to do something to your hand real bad.
Yeah, I suppose you do have a point that, a piece of equipment that's designed to protect your head from crashing at 60 miles an hour, probably a fist isn't going to do much on it.
Maybe he's punching their shoulder.
Or, like, right in the neck.
Oh, I didn't think about getting punched in the neck while driving a motorcycle is going to ruin your day.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you did much physics in high school and college.
Some.
I have a physics-based question.
Yeah.
How fast do you have to be going on a motorcycle that when you get into a head-on collision with a car, you cause it to blink out of existence?
Oh, that's actually, that's a physics equation that they teach you along the way. It's kind of the blink out of existence point of any object. It has to do with a velocity equal to its mass squared. Yeah.
Okay. That seems like pretty sound science. I had to start imagining that this nice family in the car who suddenly gets hit by a motorcycle, they're sent into some like parallel dimension where demons live in a warehouse and they're just like, ah! No, but yeah, you hit a car hard enough head on and it will just vanish. And your guy just gets back up. You're going like 120 miles an hour and you hit the front end of a car. You're not getting back up. They're going to put you in small, like, plastic bags they got from Rosars and just drop you in a cooler.
I would say that the medical aspects of this game are maybe not super realistic. And neither are the legal aspects either, because I got stopped by the police, and in the course of the police chase, I punched out another biker. I punched him in the head with the cop watching me. I punched him in the head until he fell off his motorcycle, and as he was falling off his motorcycle, I ran over his body so that I could do a sweet jump, and then I kicked another guy into the path of an oncoming car. And then I punched the cop a few times before I crashed and I got arrested. And for all that, it was a $200 fine for basically like 2 murders and an attempted murder.
This seems reasonable.
Yeah.
That cop would have taken out his gun and just shot you.
The cop thought he was being like a real like tough guy about it too. He's like, ha ha ha, here's your $200 fine, murder guy.
The fine in Arizona for murder is $200. Don't do it again or you'll get a $200 ticket. Yeah, cops, they're not good at their jobs in Road Rash. I have a question about geography since we like to talk about geography.
Yeah.
What is the one key element of the Pacific Coast Highway in California?
Probably that it follows the coast of the Pacific Ocean.
Okay. In Road Rash, you drive the Pacific Coast Highway, and there is not a drop of water to be seen.
Well, I mean, it follows the coast, so the perspective of the game is right from behind your bike. So just off screen, just off to the left, is the beautiful expanse of the Pacific Ocean in all its wonder, just out of sight.
So your little man can look over and be like, man, that's pretty awesome. I wish the player could see it. Maybe this is the old Pacific Coast Highway that we built wrong, that doesn't follow the coast. Oops.
They're like, we couldn't figure out where the coast was. We couldn't find it. So we just built the road here.
So I guess you can win this game. I don't know. It just seems like trying to get first place and everything. You get better finish line little cinematics if you are in first place compared to last place. It's nothing to write home about.
No.
The fun part of the game is actually just racing and apparently doing horrible bike violence to other people. And that escalates quickly in Road Rash 2.
Yeah.
Like the blue bike gang finds out about you and they're like, okay, everyone keep a chain on your bike to smack this idiot in the head. And the opening splash screen for the first game, like I said before, has you pushing the other bike over. In Road Rash 2, you're both swinging chains around your head. Like, it's on.
Yeah, by Road Rash 2, the word's gotten out about, there's a psycho on the loose. But it's still, it's like they're afraid of you. Like, they have their weapons, but they're like, oh, please don't let them show up at this race. They just look in the rearview mirror and they see all their compatriots, like, getting taken out. And they're like, he's coming. Oh, no.
It's Jeff. So, again, physics, I don't understand this. When you're riding a bike at 200 miles an hour, swinging a chain like you're swinging a lasso, I imagine would be very hard. For A, that would make you wobble all over the place, and B, that's just going to want to fly straight back behind you.
My best guess is that you're Ghost Rider.
Without the fire?
Well, under the helmet. Because Ghost Rider has to obey helmet laws.
He doesn't want to crack his skull head. So Road Rash 2 ups the violence quite a bit. They're hitting you back finally.
Yeah.
They can knock you off your bike and instantly you're in last place. The rubber banding in this game isn't so bad. If you get out in front, you can just dust everybody.
The rubber banding isn't an issue. The difficulty level in Road Rash 2 can be a bit of a problem because if you have even one crash, you're probably not gonna finish in the top 5. I've done races where, I'll get through most of it. I'll hit a car, and just barely clip it. And it's just like, well, doing this one all over again.
And there's different levels of crashes in this game. There's the, oops, I fell over, and I can get my bike back up and just go. Then there's the, oops, I hit something, and I slid for 4.5 miles. And then your guy runs back to his bike to get back in the race. If you slide more than 2 seconds, you might as well just write that one off, because they're not letting you win.
And the cinematics and the little character portraits got a huge upgrade for Road Rash 2. Like, the ones that you see in Road Rash 1, it looks like some 10th grader was like, I'm gonna draw you. And then, like, they'd never, like, done any study of art before. It's like what I would have drawn for one of my sophomore drawing classes. You know, it's just these people that look horribly deformed, and it's their little portrait, and then they're trying to say something encouraging like, we all like to rice spikes here, and it's like, thanks, Natasha, you mutant. Then for, Road Rash 2, same character, and she actually looks sort of human.
Is there a guy named Grubbs or something?
I think so.
One side of his face is longer than the other. Like, at his chin cleft, his left side just started melting off him.
Yeah.
But he's like, I'm still gonna drive motorbikes. And he tells you to look out for somebody because he has a club and he might hit you. I never saw anyone swing a club at me in that race.
Yeah.
And you earn money for winning races, where you can buy hotter bikes.
Yeah, which means that somebody's bankrolling this, because whether you finish first or last, you win some money. So it's not like they're betting against each other, where, like, if you lose, like, they take your money. Like, somebody is funding all of this violence.
It's probably a Kickstarter. Watch us beat each other on bikes. Stretch goal, we come to your town. Now that we talked about the two good ones, we'll have to talk about the elephant in the room. Road Rash 3. They got rid of the beautiful pixel art.
Yes.
And replaced it with photographs of people on motorbikes. Like Mortal Kombat style.
Yeah.
Just not at the quality of Mortal Kombat.
Not at the quality of Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis, which wasn't a work of art to begin with.
They broke the road engine. It's a lot jankier in the third one, which I don't know how you step back on that one. They tried to get it to do more, but it's not as smooth.
Yeah.
And they tried to inject humor into it with, like, police dogs attacking your guys if you get pulled over.
Yeah, that's funny.
There's a helicopter with a hook that will fly by and impale your driver and rip him off the bike. In Road Rash 3, that's the police's answer. We'll hang a giant meat hook off a helicopter and just spear Jeff. That's how we're going to get him.
There's nothing funnier than police brutality and murder. That's great. It seems really terrible now, but even then it seemed pretty... It was not comfortable humor.
No, it was terribly bad humor. But the problem is they're really well animated.
Yeah.
Like, more work went into those animatics than went into the rest of Road Rash 3.
Road Rash 3 came right around a time when a lot of the EA franchises were changing their art style in kind of the same way. Transferring from pixel art to kind of this, like, digitized photo rendering. It's weird because they weren't all developed by the same studio or anything. Like, EA was the publisher, and different teams were actually making these games, but, I don't know if it was a directive from up top or something down to all these teams, but almost all the franchises around that time, the sports games, Road Rash, the Strike series, they all started, like, doing their graphics differently, and not only did it look worse in most cases, but it also had damaging effects on the gameplay.
Like, someone in EA made a company-wide call, was like, we need to make all our games look terrible. Can we do that?
Just like several years earlier, somebody made the company-wide call of, we need to make all our games with, like, the weird Genesis bass music throughout all the soundtracks.
Now, Road Rash 1 has an option that I found weird. You can have motorcycle noises, or you can have music. You cannot have both.
The Genesis could only do so much, especially in 1992.
The music is there. I can't say it's pleasant.
It exists.
I'm going to go ahead and say it's better than the noises the motorcycles make. Because that is a sweet hell.
Yeah.
The obvious answer is I'm going to listen to this looping 2.5 second clip of music.
Yeah.
Over the hell scream of the motorbikes. But if you do that, you miss your man, Jeff, when he finishes the race, throwing his hands in the air and going, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
There was a different game that EA put out, Lotus Turbo Racing. It was a racing game where you drove Lotuses. The Genesis controller had 3 buttons, and the one button accelerated. The other button was the brakes, which you didn't have to use because it was a racing game on the Genesis. And the third button was to make your driver yell, "Yeehaw!" Except that they rendered it really badly, so it sounded like a Decepticon going, "Yeehaw!"
Brad, I know we're talking about Road Rash, but can we talk about Lotus Racing for a second?
Yes.
People who buy Lotuses
Yes.
generally have to have a certain amount of money.
They're not Ferrari expensive, but they ain't cheap.
But generally, the people buying those do not say yeehaw like they're on a tractor.
I mean, probably not. Lotus is a very high-end sports car manufacturer, and they're British-based. So, being European, being an expensive sporty car, it does kind of have this, air of elegance to it. Probably not a lot of people hopping into one and just, tearing down the road and being like, "Yeehaw!" in an evil robot voice.
Maybe in the European version, you push the button and they're like, smashing. They won't understand that in the US. What do they do when they're having fun? They say yeehaw.
Yeah.
So you go through many different places in Road Rash. You get to go to Utah, Tennessee, LA, California. You go to California again.
So Road Rash 1, there's 5 tracks and they're all in California, which is where the development studio was from. So yeah, it's actually kind of an interesting thing about a lot of EA games from this time, have kind of a California bias to them. All the tracks in Road Rash 1 are in California. The very first NHL game, the LA Kings are on the cover. It's a lot of little things like that. Road Rash 2 has 5 tracks. Alaska, Hawaii, Tennessee, Arizona, and Vermont. It's not California, and California. That was Road Rash 1.
I was just listing all the good tracks in the game.
Yeah.
The 2 games in this trilogy.
What I thought was interesting about Road Rash 2 is each track has its own music for that one. And they tried to kind of make it sound appropriate to the location. So the Hawaiian one has some tribal sounding drums. And the Tennessee one has kind of a country bluegrass feel to it. And, to the degree that Vermont has a signature music style, I guess they captured it on the Vermont track.
I didn't know you could turn maple syrup into a musical styling.
Well, I think it's probably, the traditional music that they listen to as they go out hunting for the great maple syrups.
Gonna get maple syrups today, Pa.
Yeah, as they form up their hunting party and they sing their traditional hunting songs. And that's what's captured in Road Rash 2.
Our listener in Vermont right now is just pulling over his car to weep. Sometimes we say this game was fun in the past. Road Rash 1 and 2 are still great.
Yeah, well, yes and no. The problem with the Road Rash games is they sort of nailed it on the first levels. So you play through the 5 tracks, and it's oh, that was super fun. And then it's you've unlocked level 2. It's the same tracks, but they're a little bit longer and harder. That's not what this game needed. Especially Road Rash 2, making the track longer, it just, when one crash is usually enough to cost you a race, you just don't want to make that go on any longer. It's already hard enough.
Well, the first thing Grubbs says to you in Road Rash 1 is, the real motorcycle clubs race 15 miles. We only race 5. 5-mile race was exhausting.
Yeah, I don't want to do something 3 times as long as this.
Maybe if you do the 15-mile-an-hour race, you finally see some water on the Pacific Coast Highway. It's just, that's the goal. You drive off a cliff into the ocean. You're like, ha, I found it, suckers. And they're like, bye, Jeff.
It's actually, you start right on the coast and you're driving inland the entire time. So if you could turn around and look behind you, you'd see the ocean in all its majesty as you head out towards Nevada.
That is the Pacific Coast Highway in California is from the coast to Nevada, Brad.
Yep.
That's how it works.
Yep. I don't need to look this up.
Hey, let's go to Nevada. We'll take the Pacific Coast Highway. Why'd they name it that? No one knows, son. Shut up.
Because it starts at the Pacific Coast, obviously.
I know that they've tried for years to bring Road Rash back. And after this week of playing Road Rash games, I'm under the impression they don't need to bring Road Rash back. By the end of the first game, I was like, yeah, they've said everything they need to say here. And then at the end of the second game, I was like, they've said everything they needed to say a second time. And the third game, I was like, oh no, what happened? They've gone mute.
There isn't much more that you can add to Road Rash. Part of what makes it so refreshing is that it is kind of, a straightforward kind of game. It doesn't get overly complex. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's just like, hey, we're going to race bikes and punch each other. And you're like, yeah, sign me up for that. But, you can only do so much with that.
The only way I could see Road Rash coming back in a meaningful way is if you gave me a VR version where you are Jeff and you have to swing your hand around and try to hit people with chains. That could be horrific as you watch a car come at you.
I am almost certain that Aerosmith made a video about this about 25 years ago that was like VR Road Rash. It had like one of those awesome early 90s VR helmets that like stuck out like 2.5 feet from your face, and like the gloves with the wires coming out all of them.
Wow.
So the thing you want already exists in Aerosmith videos.
Thank you for bringing up Aerosmith. That just makes my life so much better thinking about Aerosmith.
Well, I know ever since we talked about Revolution X, you've been kind of sad that like that's over and we weren't talking about them anymore. So,
man, Aerosmith ruins all my hopes and dreams all the time. All Steven Tyler does is sit around and think of ways to ruin my days.
He's like, well, what does Donald like?
He calls radio stations. He's like, hey, why don't you play one of our songs and then a Smashing Pumpkins song when he's driving? That will make him happy.
I would love to think that the reason that Aerosmith songs get so badly overplayed whenever a new one comes out is because Steven Tyler keeps calling the radio station and requesting it. He's like, hey, could you play Crying again? I know you just played it, but that song's awesome. And the DJ's like, yeah, I guess. Nobody else is calling us because, we're a radio station.
So, can I get your name, friend? Stephen Perry.
What, the guy from Journey?
Yes. There's not much to say more about Road Rash. I don't understand how they got it to render the road like it did. If you've never seen Road Rash, do yourself a favor and go watch Road Rash 1 or 2 on YouTube. And just see how that road renders. It's baffling that a Genesis did this.
Yeah, no other 16-bit game that I can think of does that nearly as well, including other ones that EA put out. You kind of wish you had your studios talking to each other and be like, here's the engine for Road Rash, use it to make the racing game you're working on so it'll actually be fun instead of, what Lotus Turbo Racing ended up being. Yeehaw button or not, that game was not great. If it had been more like Road Rash, even with the punches being replaced by a yeehaw button, it still would have been a much better game.
It's like if Outrun was really smooth.
Yeah.
That's the best way to describe it. Sometimes if you hit a hill going too fast and you run over someone at the same time, you can fly like there's a little alien in the basket of your bicycle.
Yeah, there's one stage that has a really, really, really tall hill. And if you hit that and you manage to, hit something that'll make you jump and you do it at a high speed, you get to just basically fly to the end of the stage. It's pretty great.
And then he just lands and he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
All the other racers are just looking above like, oh, okay, I can't compete with that.
If that happened to me, all the other racers would be sprinkled by urine as I flew overhead. Because I would not be able to contain myself in my red jumpsuit. It's cool that EA brought this out, because this easily probably should have been a PC game.
Yeah. And I guess we didn't get into it too much, but this being EA month and everything, the historical context of this wasn't one of the first games that they put out on the Genesis. This was sort of second wave, but they were still experimenting a lot and trying a lot of original ideas. So, games from the 91, 92 era that came from EA, it's a lot of interesting ideas. They didn't all work. This one certainly did. The real early ones were usually like stuff that they'd already put out on the PC. And then you're kind of hitting this wave here of like stuff that they did specifically for the Genesis that was like new ideas. A lot of cool stuff came out around this time. And this was probably one of their biggest hits.
So out of the 3 EA games we've played so far, I believe this is the most technically competent one.
Yeah, I mean, Jungle Strike and Desert Strike are pretty solid.
They are solid, but man, that road and the way they rendered that road.
Yeah, Road Rash probably did it better than any other game in that genre on that generation.
Yeah, I mean, Strike is amazing for just the simulation level.
Yeah.
Rings of Power was neat because they went completely bonkers and put something that wasn't supposed to be on a Genesis on a Genesis.
Yeah, but from a technology standpoint, it's pretty brutal.
Yes, it's so broken. But Road Rash, you just have to see how smooth that road runs. And then remember, Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo does not hold up like this. Super Nintendo talked about scaling and rotation and all that, and EA is over there like, oh, we don't have all that technology. Let's make a perfectly scrolling road. And someone was like, okay, I can do that, and then did that.
Yeah, and, all the other racing games from that time look like pole positions still. And it's like, oh, I can see 10 feet in front of me. Oh, I crashed.
How did no one going through the 16-bit era look at this and say, we have to figure out how this is working because this will revolutionize all road-based racing games.
Yeah.
Like, you don't see how this technology was deployed for this game in anything else in the 16-bit era.
No, really, you don't get racing that's this well done until full 3D rendered environments, like Gran Turismo and stuff like that. Anything done, in a 2D kind of simulated depth like this, nobody did it anywhere close to as well as Road Rash did.
So that is why Road Rash has joined us for EA month. One, it's a cool game where you get to do motorcycle punching, and it was revealed that Jeff is the single worst person on a motorcycle. What if that's what they're like, Jeff, you have to wear red so when we know when you're coming. Because we just want to pull our bikes to the side of the road and let you win. So you can yell, yeah, yeah, yeah. Man, Jeff's the worst. I mean, I think that's going to do it for Road Rash. Unless you have some things to say about it.
No, that's all I've got.
All right, well, if you want to reach us, all that information's in the show notes. Do yourself a favor and play some Road Rash 1 or 2 and not 3. I'm Donald, that was Brad, and we will see you next week.
Oh my gosh, I found a picture of the development team for this MLB RBI game. It looks like a dad convention.